The Death Star was one of the most feared symbols of Imperial rule, an ultimate weapon with unimaginable power. But while the Death Star was terrifyingly destructive, its true power wasn't brute force, but rather the fear that force commanded. This tactical principle, otherwise known as the Tarkin Doctrine, was the defining philosophy of the Imperial approach to ruling the galaxy, a method popularized by Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin. But while the Tarkin Doctrine primarily characterized the Empire, its roots lie back in the Clone Wars, when Tarkin served in the Republic Navy. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Tarkin's oft-forgotten role in the Clone Wars and how it transformed galactic-scale warfare forever.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Rule through fear of force rather than through force itself was the basic principle of Tarkin's military philosophy. Psychological weapons, in his mind, were far more effective than all the firepower in the galaxy, as they could crush the morale of opponents and defeat them without the need to fire a single shot. Practically speaking, this conserved resources, but it also meant that, from Tarkin's point of view, the galaxy would keep itself orderly, as rebellion would be dismissed as a hopeless endeavor. This principle underwrote virtually the entire Imperial military. The distinctive armor of Imperial stormtroopers was designed to make them look unsettling, while the Imperial Navy often relied on massive Star Destroyers and Dreadnoughts, which were far larger than anything any enemies of the state could scrounge up. Some might criticize the impracticality of this approach to combat, but there was a logic to it, as Tarkin himself described in a memo to Emperor Palpatine. I maintain that the effectiveness of the Star Destroyer stems not only from its massive firepower, but from its size. When citizens look at a Star Destroyer and then compare it to the craft which might be mustered to attack it, they have a tendency to dismiss such a notion as suicidal rather than approach the problem tactically. This, of course, was why the Empire built not just one, but 2 Death Stars. A fleet of Star Destroyers had the power to cleanse an entire planet of life in about an hour and were far more practical in other pursuits. But that sort of destructive power wasn't the point in building the Death Star. Ideally, the Death Star wouldn't have had to have been used. Instead, their fear of it would have kept local systems in line. Its sheer power and its immense size created the perception of an unassailable superweapon. If the Rebel Alliance hadn't destroyed the first one quickly and effectively, they would almost definitely have hemorrhaged support and dissolved in under a year, all without the Empire needing to do much of anything. The rule of fear was only one part of the Tarkin Doctrine, however. Tarkin also called for nationalizing and cannibalizing the HoloNet, turning it into a military-only network, as well as consolidation of territory so as to allow Moffs to hunt down rebels beyond the borders of their sectors. Both of these suggestions became Imperial policy as well. The Empire banned non-military use of the HoloNet, and it also divided the galaxy into oversectors, larger regions where military forces could hunt down the Empire's enemies without starting turf wars between Moffs. Unbeknownst to many, the Tarkin Doctrine started to take effect years before the Empire came into existence. Tarkin had presented then Supreme Chancellor Palpatine with his concept for what would become the Death Star in 29 BBY, years before the beginning of the Separatist crisis. With the outbreak of the Clone Wars, some of Tarkin's other suggestions were partially implemented as well. The sector army system was an early step toward the oversectors of the Empire, and the Republic made moves toward nationalizing the HoloNet as well. It's easy to forget that Tarkin played a major role in the Clone Wars, as he doesn't really appear all that much in many Clone Wars era stories. Indeed, his brother Gideon Tarkin was more famous at the time due to his role in organizing Republic priority theaters at Eriadu. But in reality, Wilhuff Tarkin was actually a massive influence on the Republic's approach to the Clone Wars. After all, he was a close personal friend of Palpatine, and he rarely shied away from telling the Supreme Chancellor exactly what he thought when it came to how the Republic was faring in the Clone Wars. During the Clone Wars, Tarkin pushed openly for territorial consolidation, keeping his support for HoloNet nationalization and the rule of fear mostly quiet at first. He and his brother proved the worth of this principle many times over the course of the war. For most of the conflict, Eriadu and a small cluster of remote colonies in the western reaches were an island surrounded by some of the most well-defended separatist worlds in the galaxy. But while lesser tacticians would have been annihilated in such a situation, the Tarkins deftly made use of all the resources they could muster, ignoring sector boundaries in favor of allocating resources to the battlefronts that needed them most. This alone changed the views of the majority of the Galactic Senate, creating tremendous support for the Oversector plan, for which there had been tremendous skepticism just a few decades earlier when Wilhuff Tarkin proposed it as a response to piracy. But even though he wasn't exactly a public proponent of ruling through fear during the Clone Wars, Tarkin frequently discussed his beliefs with Palpatine and with other higher-ups in the Republic military. The Venator class and Victory class Star Destroyers, the first of Kuat's infamous Star Destroyer line, were early examples of the rule of fear manifesting in the Republic military. Though the Jedi were often oblivious to it, Republic Star Destroyers were designed, in large part, to be imposing, much like the Imperial class Star Destroyers of later years would be. Rule of fear wasn't just a symbolic matter either. From very early on, the clone garrisons that supposedly protected certain worlds, most notably Coruscant, became aggressive toward local populations, taking over from the local police and violating citizens' basic rights. The Coruscant Guard was particularly infamous for having clone shock troopers perform unwarranted searches and seizures for no legitimate reason, but instead to terrify potential separatist sympathizers. As we've discussed in prior videos, this was just the beginning of what became the Imperial Police state, and its development was influenced by Tarkin from the very beginning. Tarkin also had a major influence on the day-to-day tactics employed by loyalist commanders. As the Clone Wars went on, non-Jedi Republic officers began to adopt far more aggressive tactics, often with a disregard for civilian lives. When the Outer Rim sieges began and the Republic started recapturing separatist worlds en masse, overwhelming force became a favored siege-breaking tactic, despite how completely it devastated the planets subjected to it. Some Jedi objected to this approach, arguing that it would just lead to resentment among conquered populations, but their objections fell on deaf ears. This aggression wasn't quite the same as ruling through fear, but it did have a similar effect and was based on similar principles. It was aimed at preventing resistance entirely instead of just fighting it, with the reasoning being that the separatist worlds wouldn't secede again if they were bombed into the Stone Age. This did have a fear effect as well, as no planet wanted to get blown to hell by the Republic Navy. There were several known examples of separatist planets that cooperated with the Republic after the recapture during the Outer Rim sieges. Charos 4, home to the designers of the Vulture droid, was one such world. When Anakin and Obi-Wan paid the planet a visit a few months after its recapture, the natives were borderline enthusiastic in welcoming them, likely out of fear of Republic reprisals. It wasn't just the officers of the Republic military who started to buy into the rule of fear over the course of the Clone Wars, however. The concept trickled down into clone ranks, and to many clone troopers, it made perfect sense. As early as the Battle of Jabim, ARC Trooper Alpha 17 was an advocate for the rule of fear, much to the dismay of his commanding officer, Obi-Wan Kenobi. During the Battle of Jabim, Alpha repeatedly suggested assassinating every political leader left on the planet, so as to terrify the Jabimi populace into submission. The Jedi shot the plan down, but that didn't stop Alpha from claiming it as a better strategy than the Jedi's. As those of you who are familiar with the Battle of Jabim surely know, Alpha ended up being proven right. The experience of the Clone Wars left many clones jaded, and when the writings of newly anointed Moff Tarkin were circulating through the ranks at the end of the conflict, many of them found themselves readily agreeing with what Tarkin had to say. When they became stormtroopers after the declaration of a new order, they quickly began to put Tarkin's theory into practice, using the rule of fear as a tactic in the suppression of separatist holdouts across the galaxy. So that's the story of the Tarkin Doctrine, the military philosophy that reshapes galactic warfare. And just before you run off, guys, if you want to learn a bit about real life history and take a look at some of the badasses of all different eras of history, check out our new channel called The Braved, where we do exactly that and take a look at some extreme badasses from any era. That's the first link in the description, guys, so make sure you check it out. But if you're more of a musical type person, we've also got our Relax Jack, where you can check out the music we used in this video and plenty of our recent videos, and some of the music you can actually use yourself in your own creative projects too. And if you want access to our behind the scenes Discord and some other exclusive benefits, check out our Patreon. And if you just want to join our wider community, click on the Geetsly's main Discord link in the description below, and our Geetsly's gaming network links also in the description below. Anyways, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.